The part where racial stuff started coming into play was, I'd say about 6, 7, when I would just hear them say slurs, and then I'd repeat them because I didn't understand what they were, and I was told, "Oh, don't say that in public. Don't say this. Don't." And I went, "Oh, it's just a bad word. It's just like any other obscenity. It's just a bad word." And I didn't understand the difference between like a regular curse word and a slur, and like a racial, kind of, point. Like I didn't, I'm a child.
And these are your parents that you're hearing just saying this around the house?
I was only with my father for maybe a year, with shared custody, but the abuse is how we got separated. But she had my mother married another man in Columbus, where I was born, and then we moved to a small rural town. Like, we're talking like 4,000 people in the main town, 600 people in another town connected, 300 people, like, like 2 red lights in a grocery store, like that kind of town.
Okay.
So that's where a lot of it came out, because Columbus was very diverse, and like, not super. I mean, this is early 2000s. So when we moved to this small town, this like an hour from Columbus, I'll even say the name of it. It's Dawson, Georgia. We lived in different areas around, so like outskirts of town, in the town, a town connecting, like, 10 minutes away. And this is like small Farmerville kind of, raise hell, praise Dale kind of community. So the thought process and the way of thinking of different cultures was not very, it wasn't very good.
So so, I mean, you're saying like you were raised sort of like, and there was a lot of like racism and homophobia, like, at what age did that become very like noticeable, and why do you feel that way? Like, looking back, like, what were some examples of things?
So it started more or less with the racial. So it started with, like, we would watch a movie, and if it had like a black lead, like a black actor who was the lead, they would change it, and I'd be like, why? I was watching that. Well, we don't watch, and they say a slur, we don't watch them on the TV. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we don't do that. Or if it was anything other than white, or if I were to watch movies or TV that had more of a different, diverse lead group of actors, actresses, or any kind of positive outlook on anything besides white culture, it was frowned upon. I was made fun of for it. I was told I was a slur lover, like that kind of thing. And we're talking, I'm not even teenager yet.
Jeez. Yeah, you said you were around 8 to 10 or something?
Yeah, this is a pattern. So it started about 8, like I noticed it at 8. And then from 10, it kind of escalated, because that's about the time we moved out of Columbus into this smaller town. Mm-hmm. Because we had visited years prior, and I got it. So here's the thing: racism is spoon fed to you. It's not like what you see in movies. It's not really shoved in your down your throat. It's slowly fed to you. But some bites are bigger than others. Sometimes you do get a big bite, and you're like, oh, this is a lot to chew on, and you have a choice to spit it out or swallow it. And me, I was always half and half, because I wanted to trust my parents, or parent at the time. So I thought, oh, they know best. They're the ones raising me, like that. I was a very logical child to a degree, but also very ignorant. But that was because I was being raised in ignorance.
Mm-hmm. Was there any black people in your town?
Here's what's funny. The majority were black.
So how was your parent or your guardians, like, interactions with black people when you'd be at like the supermarket or anything like that?
Well, my mother is a narcissistic, two-faced, backstabbing liar. I'll be honest. Like, to put it, that's the sweetest way I can put it. And so she'd be friendly, and then she would even have people. She's like, oh, they're one of the good ones. Like, that's a big phrase that I know everyone's heard at least once. Oh, they're one of the good ones. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, it's such a hard thing to even explain, even though I was raised in it, that the ignorance is so bliss and it's alive. It's like when you watch it, you're like, this is a prank, right? Like this isn't real, and they're like, no, this is happening right now.
Do you remember
It's
at that age any confusion, or could you try to, walk us through what you were feeling? Because I think that's such a great analogy that you said of being spoon fed and sort of, indoctrined into this way of thinking. But then, yeah, you go out of the house and you see black people at the supermarket. I would imagine it's confusing as you're trying to wrap your mind around, what this all means and how the world works in the perspective that, you're starting to gain.
So the reality I built, and I say I built because like we all have to build our own perception of what we're raised in. And my perception is, when we're out in public, it's everybody can be friendly. Like to me, I thought everyone was like this. I thought black people were like this, Mexican people. I really thought we all went out in society and we all played along and we got along. But when we got home, that's when, you would say the slurs or feel like animosity or like, I don't want them over the house. I thought that was just normal. I thought everybody did that. And what happened to break that cycle is that I went to the public school. So
this is something we want to dive into because this gives us more insight into our enemy and how our enemy thinks, how our enemy operates. So, hey, Pat, man, let's start with you. This was I thought this clip was interesting. I thought the whole interview was interesting. Like, what are your overall thoughts on what you just heard about this young man explaining his experience of being raised to be racist?
It pretty much agrees with my experience dealing with racists that have kind of white supremacists that have felt comfortable enough to share.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember now. I spent a number of years in the military. I definitely rubbed elbows with my share of racists, and in that environment, they feel comfortable and emboldened to share. Okay. Now, I'm not broadcasting that across the entire military. I'm saying during my time, I ran into an environment that was very much supportive of that type of energy, and so the people thrived in it and they shared. So, and there, I recognize some elements of what he was saying about it starting small and it being, spoon fed, and then them being taught how to maneuver in public. White supremacists is very much code switch too. That's not a minority only thing. Like everybody code switches.
Well, one thing about this that's great to me is we find out that we're not that much different.
And that's exactly what I was getting to. A lot of the things that he's alluding to that he thought everybody did, but now he sees that they don't. I'm like, no, to a degree, everybody does do those things. To a degree. Nobody walks around in public interacting with people the way they talk about them at home. There are very few people that do that.
Right.
But there are very few. And then when you're talking, so you might find some individuals that do it. But when you're talking about groups of people, no, that's not happening. That's not happening. And so, so everybody code switches. Everybody has these things that they know are not to be shared in public. But then when they get home, everybody's indoctrinating their kids into their way of thinking. And what is most interesting to me is how we specialize the other, right? So in that, it's like the current antidote for racism is dialogue. You got to talk, right? Yeah. And what I've always found interesting about that antidote is that it doesn't do anything but make you the special other. When a racist, white supremacist, or whatever is interacting with you and they think you're different, it doesn't change their perspective of everybody. It changes their perspective of you. You become the different nigga amongst all the niggas. And I think that key component of racism and of group psychology is something that is missed. As an individual, there is no dialogue you can have that is going to change the opinion of a racist, of a hardcore extremist. No, you become the different other, but I still got to kill the rest of you niggas. And if you put up too much of an issue, nigga, I'll kill you too.
Well, it's also reinforcement of stereotypes for the white people as well. When you exude certain behavioral characteristics, yeah, we do see you as an individual, but I knew you niggas act like that.
It's a because we're not addressing the way people think and process information. People are constantly seeking to confirm what they already know, confirmation bias. So if you become the different nigga, then I can still hold my beliefs about all of the niggas by saying that you're the different nigga. And then the moment you act like the rest of the niggas, I knew you niggas.
Well, and
It's a lose.
Their perception of that reinforcement doesn't even have to be real. Actually, it just had to be real to them. So, for an example, I was watching a video. It was one of them little crazy dating videos, and the guy was rejected by a girl, and one of the reasons she rejected him because he was from Alabama, and she was like, "Well, you Alabama people are backwards in country. Don't you marry your cousins?" And she was like, "Well, I've been to Alabama once." And I saw it, so I know it's real. But I'm like, you ain't go to Alabama and see no cousins get married. But you went to Alabama and you saw certain behavioral characteristics that was enough to be confirmation for you to say these people are backwards. That's all people need. And we have to realize that. But
and I'm landed.
Right. But it gets into the shaping of people's minds, the shaping of people's perceptions, how people are socialized, especially how a race is socialized, but also how people are socialized. Because one thing we're going to get into is racism versus discrimination. Everybody's not racist, but we all discriminate. So, PC, what are your thoughts on this video of this young man explaining his experience?
Well, I ain't never been to Alabama, but I've been to Mississippi.
Hey, Mississippi.
I think I'm not surprised. I've actually seen it. And the irony is people think because you live in the North, you don't get to see, open racism or even racism that's poorly veiled. But there's a saying about Pennsylvania. Everything west of Philadelphia is Pennsylvania. So, you get to see it. And then Philly, you got neighborhoods that black people aren't necessarily welcome to. You got Port Richmond, the area near the river that when you had the uprisings in 2020, they were outside talking about we're waiting for you niggas to come on our block, this, that, and the other. You had, I went to Bloomsburg University in the early 90s. That's north central Pennsylvania. That's literally about 2 hours away from Penn State's main campus. And I'm gonna tell you, you get to see a lot. We, as a black student, or as they identified us back then, a student of color, for which we probably held, the brainwashing is intense.
Yeah, we color.
We were actually, deemed to be sort of like racism 101 facilitators. And so we would be a part of this whole thing where they would invite people from the different townships around Bloomsburg to learn about racism, which is ironic. It was ironic because the majority of the people there had never met anybody black. It was really ironic to hear somebody say you're the first black person I ever met. But my impression of you is based on what I've seen on the news and TV. Or
so well.
I don't like black people because this one time I was in McDonald's, this black girl was working behind the counter and she was rude to me. She happened to be black. So my impression of all black people was, like Patrick was saying, the confirmation bias.
Reinforced by what they learned at home or in the community.
Right, because I also went to college with some cats, and they would get real comfortable around you, and they start telling these jokes. And one guy told this joke about he was moving bowling balls, right? And so in the back of a truck. But then these 3 black guys went to the back of the truck. I guess I don't know how they ended up in the back of the truck, but somebody went back in the back of the truck and said, "Holy shit! You know, whatever you was carrying in those eggs, 3 of them hatched." And they were, but he was referring to the 3 black guys in the back of the truck. And I'm sitting there thinking like, damn, dude, the joke ain't funny. And then, somebody else is sitting next to me is like, I guess that's the whole point of it, isn't it? I'm looking at him like, because you could tell he was a stone racist who happened to be on the same wing that I was on when I was on campus. And I'm not surprised by this because as a therapist, I worked with white clients out in the county of Philadelphia, part of Pennsylvania. And I would hear some of the notions that were brought up, even the ones that seemed innocent. Like one of the kids, he's grown now, but one of the kids, he got upset because a black kid at his school was having a birthday party. And when he asked why he wasn't invited, the kid said, "It's a black thing, you wouldn't understand." So the kid came home and said to his mother with tears in his eyes, "I thought that's what Dr. Martin Luther King died for." And I was sitting there looking at her like, why the fuck didn't you correct him?
Right.
It's like he wasn't Jesus dying for our sins, But that's the type of shit and see, so that becomes like the liberal benevolent version of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The liberal, we're better than them because we're not using the N-word, this, that, and the other. But picture you're painting, it's still racist. And as far as I'm concerned, everybody, black people included, are indoctrinated to be stewards of racism, white supremacy, until proven otherwise.
Right. Everybody in America.
So if you, and I brought this up, I think we had a group therapy session a couple days ago. And we talked about the hostility that black people have towards each other, not to flip the script, because I don't want to make it seem as though I'm sort of like softening the blow on the fact we're identifying how these racist, white supremacists are created and formed. But we're talking about the hostility that we have for one another and how at a very young age we're taught to see each other, through the lens of some sort of vendetta, or we're taught to have a level of hostility towards one another, but we treat the white man that wanders into our neighborhood or the white lady that rolls down her window and needs direction, we treat them like they're special, pietous creatures.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the fact that white supremacy work is even we have those conversations about don't trust that nigga over there, that nigga ain't shit, fuck that nigga. Excuse the language for the folk, because I know people are bothered by it, but I'm using this to express the type of language that's so common. It's so common. I've done this with like several groups of students. I said, go home for the weekend. Don't use the word nigga or bitch. Instead, replace it with the word brother or sister. And tell me how the response is. And tell me how you feel about that, how the conversation's about. Without fail, whether it was middle school, whether it was high school, or whether it was college students, they all came back the same way the next week. Oh, Mr. Jones, why did you do that? You know how hard it was to have that conversation? I couldn't say it with the same anger and the same vigor. I said, yeah, because you added a human quality to that person. And it dehumanizes, it demeans us, and it takes away from our humanity when you refer to yourselves as niggas and bitches. It makes